We now have our second session, Valuing Carbon in the Age of Climate, the Tourism Opportunity. May I invite on stage Julian Matthews, the founder and ambassador of TOFT, Mr. Paras Loomba, founder of GHE Global Himalayan Expeditions, Sophie Hartman, founder of Holiday in Rural India, Essaji Vahanvati, partner Bagh, Tola Jungle Lodges, and our moderator, Ms. Ritu Makhija, Director Sustainability, TOFT. Please join us on stage.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. We are very happy to have you all. And today we have the second panel happening, which is with the topic valuing carbon in the age of climate crisis. All of us over here are great advocates of responsible tourism. And we are gathered here today to really talk about as to how we can create that conscious travel, because at the end of the day, we all feel, and we feel very strongly that tourism is a force for good.
I'm Julian Matthews. I'm the founder and now ambassador, wonderful name for me, of TOFT Tigers, or I should call it TOFT, sorry. I started it a number of years, 22 years ago, I think.
I'm sitting here today because we are also doing a lot of work in carbon financing. And of course, we do conduct tours in some of these areas, FITs and normal circuit-based. Yep, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Essaji Vahanvati. I'm actually a lawyer by profession, but I'm also owner of Bagh Tola. It's a lodge in Bandhavgarh. Thank you guys for having me.
So thank you so much. So Paras, I'd like to start with you. We actually, so the carbon is like the elephant in the room. There's too much talk happening, and we know when carbon managed properly, we can make all the difference in the travel. So, for our audience over here, there are too many confusing words, carbon neutral, carbon offset. So can you really make it in a very easy manner, explain the simple terms about carbons, especially vis-a-vis where tourism community is related?
Yeah, even we have been trying to figure this out over the last, you can say, 5-6 years now. I think over the years, one thing is good that these carbon calculators have come out. But again, many people, especially in India or subcontinent, are still not aware of what actually is carbon. Is it a good thing or it's a bad thing, Yeah. So a few terms which we look at, when for every one of you who either has a resort or mostly are resort people or lodges or they run tour operations. The first thing and foremost thing is measuring the carbon footprint, which is the emissions you or your tour would have or your property would have over a day, over a month or over a year. That is based on the kind of sources of power you have. It could be fossil fuel based, it could be a water footprint, it could be anything which is harmful for the environment. So they have given a term called carbon, which releases CO2 in the atmosphere. The second term, which normally is carbon offset. They say you may want to travel to X destination and pay X amount of money to do an offset at Y destination. That's the normal trend. And that has kind of led to many misnomers. Is it good or bad? Interesting, there was an article by Intrepid around a month back where they said we will stop doing carbon offset. But it's not bad, I would say. It's how you try and choose the carbon offset. If you're traveling in an area where you have emitted or you consumed carbon, the footprint is high. And in the same area, you do some good work by setting up renewable energy or supporting the communities through clean energy or clean tech. That is much more better carbon offset than going to Africa in a luxury resort, which is still not bad, good, very nice. But you do something in a different location which doesn't have a connect together. But something which is normally not spoken about is carbon inset. There's offset, but there's something called inset. Inset means it normally goes with net zero. I'll come to net zero and carbon neutral as well. I don't want to do a class here in case anyone. So these are 5-6 terms. Everyone just uses it. So we are doing an event. I'm part of an association. We are doing an event where we are saying carbon neutral, carbon neutral. We say it's not carbon neutral, it's net zero. And I'll come to that. Carbon inset is, suppose you have a lodge or a resort. You end up doing as much as you can to curb the emissions, like installing solar power plant, solar thermal water heaters, it could be a greenhouse. Anything and everything which reduces the footprint of carbon. And that's the effort you put in to do that. It could even be an EV vehicle for a resort. That is called carbon inset. And still there will be some kind of emissions which are still, you can't avoid it, right? Or we call them scope 3 emissions. I won't go into detail, but the word is scope 3. And for that, you purchase carbon offset or you do some good work which is outside your periphery, outside your lodge. That is carbon inset plus carbon offset. That's the best. So the maximum carbon inset you can do and the left out is carbon offset. That's the best possible thing. And the last terms which we use is carbon neutral and net zero. Both seem similar, right? Neutral, zero, net zero, zero. But preference is always net zero. If you're doing as much as you can to get the emission zero, and the left out is the carbon offset you do, that is net zero. That means you're trying an approach to neutrality with the conscious mind that you want to do things in a good way. Carbon neutral is you may end up doing a business class trip to X number of places. There are options available which may be much lesser carbon footprint, but you still choose a much more polluted source, I would say, and then you do an equal offset somewhere else, which is still fine than not doing anything, but it's not that better than net zero. So try and approach a net zero approach than a carbon neutral approach. Again, I may have some people who are much more educated and may have a conflict with them, but this is the 5-6 terms. You must want to read upon it and use it properly. So these are the terms tourism normally uses.
I know it's very confusing, but for me, I mean, it takes a while really to understand all these terms. It doesn't come in one go. But for me, what I understand is that, trees are basically, are giving oxygen and taking in carbon. So the more trees we are planting, they are in a way helping us take away the carbon. It's a simple kind of an understanding which we have. And saying about that, Julian, I'd like to come to you. We at TOFT, I mean, the legacy which you gave us, and we have advocated, that a well-managed tourism can help really, regenerate ecosystems, the biodiversity, the community livelihoods and all. And so where do you think the carbon fits into all this? I mean, can you just tell us about it? Yeah.
Thank you, Ritu. Yeah, carbon is a really interesting one. Of course, carbon's been around 30 years probably now in terms of its value, its cost. But the reality, and I often feel this, that we've got to a point now where we're trying to invent things that, and particularly petroleum companies, invent the ability to take carbon out of our atmosphere. But actually, you know what? Our Earth has been doing this for millions and millions of years. So the very best way to take carbon that humans have been putting into our atmosphere is to actually restore habitat. It is simply what's happened. You actually just need to leave nature to do it for you. In fact, you don't even need to plant trees. Sometimes that's not a particularly good way to do it. Let it do some of the stuff for you. You've got to take off the main pressures. But I have a massive problem with things like carbon capture, where they're trying to spend vast amounts of money. That sort of money, and we've in the British have just given a carbon capture funding of 11 billion quid to probably some petroleum company or offset of petroleum. The reality is we need that money invested in the UK landscape for biodiversity, as an example, would totally turn around UK biodiversity. And we'd be able to get that carbon into our own soils back in through regeneration and rewilding. So actually this idea that we need technology to save us from it is complete nuts as far as I'm concerned. So carbon is incredibly useful as a way of valuing habitat and allowing it to be restored. And we haven't really gone the full journey on that yet. It's happening. It's happening in Costa Rica. It's happening in parts of Africa where whole areas are using carbon as a funding mechanism, where Scope 3 can become can be used in other parts of the world. And that is very, very powerful. It's not perfect. There are lots of challenges, lots happening, but actually some of that is very powerful. And I would love India to see more of it. The other one that's not really known so much about is biodiversity credits, which are separate to carbon credits and are coming down the wire right now and are beginning to be used. Some of the biggest organizations in African park management are beginning to set up biodiversity credits. And so these will be very valuable going down the road. And when it comes to you and your various resorts with your 100 acres or your 40 acres, there may be, in the future, there may be real value in that landscape for the restoration that you've done. And even for the uplift of that restoration, because that's really where that carbon is calculated, is the uplift. So think about that in terms of biodiversity monitoring of your own landscapes that you have, because actually that might be very valuable going forward.
Thank you, Julian. That's insightful, definitely. Sophie, next I'd like to come to you. I mean, you're doing brilliant work with the rural and the communities, community-based tourism. Thank you so much for that. And we know India has got huge land, forests, rural areas, and there's so much which is there. And as such, there is enormous potential for the nature-based climate solutions for it, which has not been tapped. So how do you think that can be tapped? How can we change this narrative?
I think it is being tapped, and RP with the Indian School of Nature has given us all an extraordinary tool to to calculate what's being tapped. I'm going to read a bit from a script because I'm absolutely terrified as a public speaker, and this is my security blanket. There is a total lack of value placed on wild spaces by governments worldwide. And I think rural tourism is one of the few industries that can help persuade rural communities that their forests and their culture are worth fighting for. We all know that if there were no tourists, there would be no tiger reserves, and tiger reserves are obviously, wildlife reserves are the biggest carbon sink that we have. But the tourism comes with a cost, and I think we're all doing pretty badly, frankly. Climate change is impacting the people amongst whom I and my lucky guests travel in a way that I and my guests, who are mostly global northerners, are unlikely ever to face. Tourism's responsible for 8% of global emissions. Sukirti, my colleague, and I are in the process of encouraging all lodges to submit their data on their carbon calculation. And we all know, as Ritu has just said, that because most wildlife reserves have large patches of land, they can sequester really effectively. For example, Chambal Safari Lodge sequesters a net 18 kilos, Bagh Tola 10, Shagar in Kana 16, Swania and Orissa, and smaller properties like that may not have the land to sequester, but their carbon footprint is tiny. But having said that, just sending people to lodges in the countryside is not the only solution. It's not enough, and it can be done as badly as it can be done well. Will you tell me when to shut up? Am I going on too long? No. Half of tourism's carbon emissions come from transport. We've all seen the impact of rainfall and of extended rainfall and cyclones. When I visited Chhattisgarh and Orissa this year, many farmers were saying they'd lost 50% of their rice crop. Several years ago in Chhattisgarh, I had the terrible, shocking sight of a farmer who'd committed suicide, his widow sobbing under the tree. It's the saddest thing I've ever seen. And we as foreigners don't have a right to come to your incredible country and just consume. It's modern day colonialism with a pretty name. Thankfully, a lower impact holiday is also a far nicer one because it focuses on reducing motorised transport and on slower, more engaging travel where guests become temporary residents and don't spend every third day of their holiday in a car and the rest of their time doing back-to-back safaris. One of the things I hear about from my guests at Shergar in particular, and love hearing, is smug reporting back of how envious other guests are who are travelling with bigger companies than mine, remarking on what a lovely time my guests seem to be having, spending a full week in one place, doing 4 rather than 10 safaris, maybe doing birding walking as well, as we were talking about before, coming away having seen tigers, but also having contributed to the local economy beyond the park gates, learned something about the people who own the land they're holidaying in, who most likely have been evicted from the land that's become a tiger reserve, walked, cycled, painted. And all those other guests say to my guests, I didn't know you could do that. And let me tell you, all the DMCs and tour operators know you could do that. But it's more work arranging walks and cycles and finding out the chai shops that sell fresh samosas and operating workshops, in taking a risk and visiting Pashu Pakshi workshops in Pench and Bana and Kanha. And it's far easier just to send guests in from back-to-back safaris. It really winds me up when people like me call themselves Indian experts. But we do know more than most of our guests. That's our job. And it's our responsibility to encourage our guests to make non-exploitative choices. I did a little carbon calculation for a holiday that I pulled down from the internet from a big company. And am I talking too much?
Yeah, I really do.
Okay. By swapping trains for losing some flights and putting in some trains, by reducing number of safaris from 10 to 4, by staying in 3 different places rather than 4, you can cut average carbon emissions from 3/4 of a ton for a 2-week holiday to a net positive of a quarter of a ton. Sorry, should I?
Sophie has given you lots of ideas. So, I mean, we want you to go out from this evening thinking about carbon and thinking how you can make a difference, anything or everything you are doing, to how to be ensuring that there's less carbon footprint. That's the whole effort of doing this conversation. And Essaji, I'd like to come to you. You're running a property, and we know properties, I mean, while they obviously promoting the destination, but they are consuming a lot of resources. So what is it that you think as a lodge owner you should do to negate? I mean, a lot of things Sophie has said, but is it anything beyond that you can add on to?
No, thank you, Ritu. So, as a lodge owner, it's not just a responsibility, but I think there's a great opportunity to also positively impact in this space. I think by the very nature of being a lodge, you're in the proximity of a very sensitive area, in the proximity of a park. So what can you do? The way we look at it, or at least I have tried to, and this becomes all the more relevant. Just today we've been talking about the number of new lodges coming about. So I think these are small things which people can do and consider. So the first part is when it comes to the building aspect of lodges. What we've tried to do specifically is that, we've tried to have as minimal a footprint in terms of our property. We've tried to do things which is natural materials, elevated, the tents are elevated. We've repurposed a lot of wood and furniture. So I think that is one aspect when people are building out lodges, try to move away from the very fixed structures, the typical cement, whatever has the minimal footprint. So that's on the building side of things. On the operation side of things as well, there are a lot of things which you can do. Like you mentioned, Paras, there's solar, there's water treatment. All of those things also kind of help contribute positively. But at the end of it, as you said, you are a lodge. A lot of people run luxury lodges. Your impact is, on the face of it, going to be negative. And so one thing which I picked up from which all the panelists here said, which is very important, is expanding your footprint, right? Like I mentioned in the beginning, you are located next to the lodge, next to the park. There are so many areas where your footprint of your underlying land can actually build. So you don't just focus on what your built up area is, but try to increase the land which is around you. So we've been trying to work with the areas, with farmers, with certain NGOs, trying to just take things and increase the footprint, because when regeneration happens, and it's unbelievable how quickly the forest comes back. Within a year, one monsoon is changed. Like you said, you don't have to plant trees. It comes back naturally. All of that which is there really, really helps, makes an impact. So I think as lodges, it's important to start looking beyond just yourself, just your operations. Of course, try and do the best you can to make a positive impact, but work with the communities, grow the land parcel which you have, let the forest regenerate as much as you can. Sometimes you may not have land which is contiguous around your property because of the number of lodges, but there's enough and more space for it to happen. I think that's something we've been trying consciously, and I think a lot of people can really kind of contribute to that.
As a lodge owner, I really feel it's very important that we understand that the destination which we are in is actually our product. So if we don't take care of the product, there will be no tourism. So we might as well know that. So I mean, I know we are short on time, but I would like Paras to close. I know you've done a massive amount of work in carbon. So is there any example that you can give, practical, and where there has been an impact, and share it with our audience today?
So, thanks, Ritu. That's something worthwhile sharing. In 2020, we were awarded a UN Climate Action Award at Glasgow. That was the first travel company to get that. And when we were there and trying to understand what is happening at the COPs, we ended up meeting few people who were doing carbon projects. So we're trying to figure out how can we use carbon as a financing tool, because we do rural development work, and mostly we'll go to international development organizations for funds, or the local administration, or any CSR. That's the only funding channel we have. So we figured out a way that we work in the region of Meghalaya. Anyone from Meghalaya here? Okay. So in the region of Meghalaya, mostly people go to Cherrapunji, Shillong. That is the two kind of destinations you would have heard of. But if you go down south from Guwahati, the region is called Garo, G-A-R-O, Garo Hills. In Garo, of course, in whole of Meghalaya Northeast, but in Garo specifically, 80% of the households, they still use firewood. And they consume between 18 kilos to 29 kilos of firewood every day for their cooking needs, just cooking needs. We'll not talk about electricity there. And of course, electricity has reached most of the places, but still in some areas, wire is there, electricity has not gone there. But we're focusing on cooking. And we figured out that if we can give them clean cook stoves, this can be either, we normally give them, we kind of did a survey of more than 200 villages, and we figured out there are almost 90% of these 200 villages in 3 districts which are still using firewood. So we got a carbon financing company, which is basically, let's say Google, I won't name it because of the NDA, but a company which won credits for their offset of their operations. We got a company from Europe who financed us to deploy 10,000 clean cook stoves in 10,000 households. For 5 years, it should be running. That means the adoption. So we got the financing. We deployed the 10,000 cook stoves, and we saw that there's a huge amount of amount of firewood which has reduced. Of course, that company got the credits. We were a project management company, but with that confidence, we installed our own 5,000 cook stoves in a separate area, and the credits which we got after selling it to some of the companies who need credits, we refinanced that financial capital back into setting up more homestays in that region. So if you search for Garo, that probably is the only, I think, case study in the world where we're using carbon financing to set up community tourism-based infrastructure. So we have around about 12 homestays which are totally financed through carbon funding. And inspired by that, we went back to Ladakh. Ladakh has these, anyone from Ladakh here? Fantastic. Okay, so in Ladakh, there is something called Bukhari or rocket stove. So Himalayan rocket stove is basically for space heating. And they have interesting carbon credits. They are able to, as per the criteria, they provide you with 10 tons per credit, which is amazing. And we deployed more than 700 rocket stoves across homestays in Ladakh. And what happens is there are credits which we have earned, and we're selling it to the customers who are coming to Ladakh every year. Okay. So we tell them, okay, why don't you pay for this? And with this money, they will be able to set up a greenhouse. So it's basically an interesting way of financing the rural development if you're able to create a nice project and have the right source which can be adopted well by the community, because if the cook stove doesn't run for the second year, you won't get credit. So you have to make sure the adoption is much more better. That's a small case study which I think is
So we
going
know
on.
who to go to, for the carbon control now. The person is right in with us. So I would like to thank the panel to be here. We already overshot the time. So thank you so much. But I would like each one of you to go from here thinking about how to save carbon and have less. Everything we do generates carbon, so how do we become conscious of it and really make a difference in our lives, starting for just now, So thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you very much, everyone. It was a great eye-opening session, and your perspectives and knowledge have helped us see that carbon is not just a challenge we must manage, but a powerful opportunity for the tourism sector to innovate, lead, and inspire the change. Thank you very much once again.